The rain tapped relentlessly against the window of Eleanor's small apartment, a rhythm that matched the unsteady beat of her heart. At 82, she had lived through enough storms to know this one wasn't just outside. It was inside her, too, swirling through decades of memories, love, and betrayal. Her hands, wrinkled and trembling, clutched a worn photograph of her son, Michael, taken when he was 10, his smile bright and untainted by the greed that now defined him. She set it down on the table, next to a half-empty teacup and a letter she hadn't yet found the courage to open. Eleanor had always believed family was her anchor. Born in a small Ohio town, she'd raised Michael alone after her husband, Tom, died in a factory accident when Michael was just 5. She worked double shifts at the diner, scrubbed floors, and saved every penny to give him a chance at a better life. She'd sewn his Halloween costumes, cheered at his soccer games, and stayed up late helping with math homework she barely understood herself. Her love for him was fierce, unyielding, the kind that could move mountains. But mountains, it seemed, could crumble. Michael had grown into a man she barely recognized. At 45, he was a stranger in a sharp suit, always chasing the next deal, the next dollar. He'd married a woman named Claire, who cared more about handbags than humanity, and their 2 children, Eleanor's grandchildren, barely knew her. Visits became rare, then stopped altogether. Phone calls were brief, transactional. She'd become a ghost in their lives, a faint memory of homemade cookies and bedtime stories. The letter on the table was from Michael. It had arrived yesterday, and even without opening it, Eleanor knew what it would say. Another request for money. Another plea dressed up as concern. She'd given him so much over the years, her savings, her retirement fund, even the small inheritance from her own mother. Each time, he promised it was the last. Each time, she believed him, because what mother wouldn't want to trust her only child? But last month, during a rare phone call, his words had cut deeper than any knife. "Mom, we're in a tight spot," he'd said, his voice clipped, impatient. "We need money. Your funeral can wait." The words echoed in her mind, cold and final, like a door slamming shut. She'd hung up without responding, her hands shaking so badly she dropped the phone. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in her armchair, staring at the walls lined with memories, and realized something had broken inside her. Now, as the rain grew heavier, Eleanor opened the letter. Her eyes scanned the familiar handwriting, the false warmth of his words. He wrote about temporary setbacks and family sticking together. But the request was clear. He needed $20,000 to save his failing business. No mention of her health, her loneliness, or the fact that she'd been eating canned soup for weeks to stretch her Social Security check. She folded the letter and set it aside, her decision crystallizing. She wasn't going to give him the money. Not this time. Not ever again. Eleanor stood, her joints protesting, and walked to the small desk in the corner. She pulled out a yellow legal pad and a pen, her hands steadier now. She'd always been frugal, saving what little she could after Michael's demands. Over the years, she'd managed to squirrel away $50,000, a modest sum she'd planned to leave to him and her grandchildren. But Michael's words had changed everything. Your funeral can wait. The cruelty of it burned, but it also set her free. She began to write, not to Michael, but to her lawyer. She wanted to change her will. The money, the apartment, everything she had, she wouldn't leave it to her son. She didn't yet know who would receive it, but it wouldn't be him. As she wrote, a strange calm settled over her. For the first time in years, she felt in control, like she was reclaiming a piece of herself she'd given away too freely. The next morning, Eleanor called her lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, a kind man who'd handled her affairs since Tom's death. "I want to rewrite my will," she said, her voice firm. "I'm leaving everything to someone else. Not my son." Mr. Hargrove paused, surprised, but agreed to meet her that afternoon. As she hung up, Eleanor felt a flicker of fear. Who would she leave her legacy to? She had no other family, no close friends left. The thought of her money going to a stranger felt reckless, yet oddly right. That afternoon, she took the bus to the community center where she volunteered twice a week. It was a place for seniors, but also for young people struggling with addiction or poverty. Eleanor had started going there after Michael moved away, needing something to fill the void. She taught knitting classes, listened to stories, and offered what little wisdom she had. The center was a lifeline, not just for them, but for her. As she walked through the doors, she saw a young woman sitting alone in the corner, her head bowed over a sketchbook. Her name was Lila, a 25-year-old artist who'd come to the center after losing her job and her apartment. Lila's drawings were raw, vibrant, full of pain and hope. Eleanor had spoken to her a few times, struck by her quiet strength and the way she seemed to carry the weight of the world without breaking. "Morning, Lila," Eleanor said, sitting beside her. Lila looked up, her dark eyes tired but warm. "Morning, Mrs. Eleanor. You okay? You look different today." Eleanor smiled faintly. "I'm making some changes," she said. "Big ones." Lila tilted her head, curious but not prying. They talked for a while. About art. About loss. About the small victories that kept them going. Eleanor didn't mention the will, but as she watched Lila sketch, an idea began to form. What if she left her money to someone like Lila? Someone who needed a chance, the way Michael once had. The thought felt radical, almost absurd, but it sparked something in her chest, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. As she left the center that day, Eleanor knew she'd found her answer. She didn't know Lila well, but she saw something in her, resilience, kindness, a spark that deserved to burn brighter. She'd talk to Mr. Hargrove tomorrow. Make it official. Her son had chosen money over her. Now, she'd choose hope over him. The bus ride back to her apartment was quieter than usual, the hum of the engine blending with Eleanor's thoughts. She stared out the window, watching the city blur past neon signs, tired faces, and the endless rhythm of life moving on. Her decision to rewrite her will felt like a stone dropped into a still pond, its ripples spreading further than she could see. She wasn't just cutting Michael out. She was rewriting the story of her life, choosing a new ending. At home, she brewed a fresh pot of tea and sat at her kitchen table, the legal pad still open from the night before. She wrote down Lila's name, then hesitated. Was it foolish to leave everything to someone she barely knew? Lila was young, talented, but also fragile, carrying scars from a life Eleanor could only guess at. What if she squandered the money? What if she wasn't ready for the responsibility? Eleanor's pen hovered over the page, doubt creeping in like a shadow. She thought of Michael again, his voice sharp and dismissive. "Your funeral can wait." The memory stung, but it also clarified her resolve. He'd had his chances, decades of them. She'd poured her heart into him, only to be treated like a bank account. Lila, on the other hand, had nothing but her art and her grit. Eleanor didn't know her full story, but she'd seen enough to recognize a soul worth betting on. The next day, Eleanor met Mr. Hargrove at his office, a small room cluttered with law books and family photos. He listened as she explained her plan, his brow furrowing slightly. You're sure about this, Eleanor? He asked. Leaving everything to someone you've just met. It's unconventional. I'm sure, she replied, her voice steady. Michael's made his choices. I'm making mine. Mr. Hargrove nodded, though his eyes held a trace of concern. All right. I'll draft the new will. You'll need to provide some details about this Lila's full name, contact information, and you should talk to her. Make sure she understands what this means. Eleanor agreed, though the thought of telling Lila made her stomach twist. How do you tell someone you're giving them your life savings? She barely knew how to start that conversation. But as she left the office, a sense of purpose settled over her. She wasn't just giving away money. She was giving someone a chance to rebuild, to dream. Back at the community center, Eleanor found Lila in her usual spot, sketching with a pencil that looked too short to hold. The young woman's dark hair was pulled back, revealing a face etched with both determination and exhaustion. Eleanor sat beside her, clutching her purse like a shield. Lila, she began, her voice softer than she intended. Can we talk? Somewhere private. Lila's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded, closing her sketchbook. They moved to a quiet corner of the center, where a faded couch sat under a window. Eleanor took a deep breath, her hands trembling. I've been thinking a lot about my life, she said, about what I want to leave behind. I don't have much, but I've saved some money, and I want to leave it to you. Lila stared, her mouth slightly open. Me? Why? You barely know me. Eleanor smiled, though her eyes were wet. I know enough. I see how hard you fight, how you keep going even when life's unfair. I want to give you a chance to make something of your talent, your heart. Lila shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. That's too much, Mrs. Eleanor. I can't. I don't deserve that. None of us deserve what we get, good or bad, Eleanor said. But we can choose what to do with it. I'm choosing you. Lila's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Finally, Lila spoke. I don't know what to say. I've never had anyone believe in me like that. You don't have to say anything, Eleanor replied. Just keep being you. Over the next few days, Eleanor and Lila grew closer. They talked about art, about dreams, about the losses that had shaped them. Lila shared fragments of her story growing up in foster care, losing her mother to addiction, scraping by with odd jobs until she found the community center. Her sketches, she said, were her way of making sense of the chaos. Eleanor listened, her heart aching for the girl who reminded her so much of her younger self, full of hope, yet battered by life. Meanwhile, Michael called again. Eleanor let the phone ring, each unanswered chime a small act of defiance. When he left a voicemail, his tone was sharper, more desperate. Mom, we need to talk. This isn't just about Mites, about the kids. Your grandkids. Call me back. She deleted the message, her chest tight, but her mind clear. By the end of the week, Mr. Hargrove had the new will ready. Eleanor signed it with a steady hand, naming Lila as her sole beneficiary. The act felt final, like closing a book she'd been reading too long. She didn't tell Lila, yet she wanted to wait, to let their bond grow naturally. But the decision brought her peace, a quiet victory over the pain Michael had caused. As she walked home that evening, the rain had stopped, and the sky was a soft pink, like the promise of something new. Eleanor felt lighter, as if she'd shed a weight she'd carried for years. She didn't know what the future held for her or Lila, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was writing her own story, The weeks that followed were a quiet revolution in Eleanor's life. She spent more time at the community center, sitting with Lila, watching her sketch, and sharing stories of her own past. Each conversation felt like a thread weaving them closer, a fragile but growing bond. Lila's laughter, rare but bright, became a sound Eleanor cherished, like a melody she'd forgotten. She began to see Lila not just as a beneficiary, but as a kind of daughter, one who chose her back. But the shadow of Michael lingered. His calls grew more frequent, his voicemail sharper. "Mom, this isn't a game," he said in one, his voice tight with frustration. "You can't just ignore me. We're family." The word family stung, a reminder of what she'd once believed they were. She didn't call back, but each message chipped away at her resolve, stirring guilt she couldn't fully shake. One evening, as Eleanor sorted through old photos, she found a picture of Michael and her at the county fair, his small hand in hers, his face lit with joy. She traced his smile with her finger, her heart heavy. Had she been too harsh? Was there still a chance to mend things? The thought gnawed at her. But then she remembered his words, "Your funeral can wait," and the guilt hardened into resolve. She tucked the photo away and turned back to her knitting, the click of needles steadying her. At the community center, Lila began to open up more. She showed Eleanor her sketchbook, pages filled with vivid drawings of city streets, broken hearts, and fleeting moments of beauty. One sketch stood out, an elderly woman with kind eyes, sitting by a window, her face a map of wrinkles and wisdom. "That's you," Lila said shyly. "I drew it after our talk." Eleanor's throat tightened. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her fingers brushing the page. For the first time, she saw herself through someone else's eyes, not as a burden or a bank, but as a person worth capturing. The sketch was a gift, more valuable than any money she could leave behind. As their friendship deepened, Eleanor began to share more about her life, her love for Tom, the sacrifices she'd made for Michael, the loneliness that had settled in her bones. Lila listened, her eyes soft with understanding. "You're stronger than you know," Lila said one day. "Most people would have given up." Eleanor shook her head. "I'm not strong. I'm just stubborn." Lila laughed. "Maybe that's the same thing." But not all days were warm. One afternoon, as Eleanor arrived at the center, she found Lila outside, her face pale, her hands shaking. "What's wrong?" Eleanor asked, guiding her to a bench. Lila hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "I got evicted. I couldn't pay rent this month. I've been staying at a shelter, but it's hard." Her voice broke, and she looked away, ashamed. Eleanor's heart sank. She wanted to help, to give Lila the money now, but her savings were tied up in the will, inaccessible until her death. "Come stay with me," she said impulsively. "I have a spare room. It's small, but it's yours." Lila shook her head. "I can't do that. You've already done too much." "It's not charity," Eleanor insisted. "It's family." The word slipped out before she could stop it, and for a moment, they both froze. Then Lila nodded, her eyes wet. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." That night, Lila moved into Eleanor's apartment, her belongings fitting into a single duffel bag. The spare room was cramped, filled with boxes of old clothes and books. But Lila didn't complain. She set up a small corner for her sketchbook and pencils, and the space felt alive again, like it had when Michael was young. Living together changed things. Eleanor cooked simple meals, pancakes, soup, casseroles, and Lila helped, her presence filling the apartment with warmth. They talked late into the night, sharing stories, fears, and dreams. Lila spoke of wanting to open an art studio, a place where people like her could create without fear of judgment. Eleanor listened, her heart swelling with pride. But Michael's calls didn't stop. One evening, as Eleanor and Lila ate dinner, the phone rang again. Eleanor sighed and answered, bracing herself. "Mom, we need to talk," Michael said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "I'm sorry about what I said. I was stressed. Can I come see you?" Eleanor hesitated, her eyes on Lila, who was quietly eating, unaware of the conversation. "All right," she said finally. "Come tomorrow." When she hung up, Lila looked up. "Everything okay?" "My son's coming," Eleanor said, her voice tight. "I don't know what he wants, but I need to face him." Lila reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You're not alone," she said. "I'm here." Eleanor nodded, but as she lay in bed that night, sleep wouldn't come. Michael's visit loomed like a storm cloud, and she wondered if she was ready for what it might bring. She'd made her choice, but choices, she knew, always came with consequences. The morning of Michael's visit, Eleanor woke early, her stomach knotted with nerves. She brewed coffee, the familiar ritual grounding her, and set out a plate of cookies she'd baked the night before. Lila was already up, sketching at the kitchen table, her presence a quiet comfort. "You sure you're okay with this?" Lila asked, glancing up. Eleanor nodded, though her hands betrayed her, trembling as she poured the coffee. "I have to do this," she said. "He's my son, even if he's forgotten what that means." When the doorbell rang, Eleanor's heart lurched. She opened the door to find Michael standing there, his suit slightly rumpled, his face lined with exhaustion. He looked older than she remembered, his hair thinning, his eyes shadowed. "Mom," he said, stepping inside. "Thanks for letting me come." Eleanor gestured to the couch, and they sat, the air between them heavy. Lila excused herself, retreating to her room with a nod of encouragement. Michael glanced around, his eyes lingering on the small changes in the apartment, the sketchbook on the table, a pair of sneakers by the door. "You've got company?" he asked, his tone neutral but probing. "A friend," Eleanor said simply. "Someone who's been here for me." Michael shifted uncomfortably, then leaned forward. "Mom, I know I messed up. What I said on the phone, it was wrong. I was desperate. The business is failing. Claire's spending is out of control, and the kids' school fees are piling up. I didn't mean to hurt you." Eleanor studied him, searching for the boy she'd raised, the one who'd once clung to her after nightmares. But all she saw was a man worn down by his own choices. "You did hurt me," she said quietly. "You made me feel like I was worth nothing unless I could pay." Michael flinched, his hands clenching. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm trying to fix things. I just need a little help. One last time. For the kids." The mention of her grandchildren tugged at Eleanor's heart, but she steeled herself. "I've given you everything I had, Michael. My savings, my security. You took it all and still asked for more. I can't do it anymore." His face hardened, a flash of anger in his eyes. "So what? You're cutting me off. After everything we've been through. I'm your son. And I'm your mother." Eleanor shot back, her voice rising. "But that doesn't mean I owe you my life." The words hung between them, sharp and final. Michael stood, pacing the small living room. "You're being selfish," he said. "You're sitting on money you don't even use. While we're drowning. What's the point of holding on to it?" Eleanor's hands shook, but her voice was steady. The point is I get to choose. And I've chosen someone else. Michael stopped, his eyes narrowing. Someone else. Who? It doesn't matter, Eleanor said. Someone who sees me, not just my bank account. The argument escalated, voices rising until Lila emerged from her room, her face tense. Is everything okay? She asked, her eyes flicking between them. Michael turned, his gaze sharp. Who are you? He demanded. Lila, she said, standing tall despite the tension. I'm a friend of your mom's. Michael's jaw tightened. This is who you're choosing over your own family? He asked Eleanor, his voice dripping with disbelief. Eleanor stood, her small frame trembling but resolute. She's been more family to me than you have in years, she said. You made your choice, Michael. Now I've made mine. He stared at her, his face a mix of shock and fury. Without another word, he grabbed his coat and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft creak of the floor as Lila stepped closer. I'm so sorry, Lila said, her voice soft. I didn't mean to make things worse. You didn't, Eleanor said, sinking onto the couch. He did. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker, her mind replaying the confrontation. She'd stood up to Michael, but the cost was heavy. He was her son, her only child, and now the rift between them felt permanent. Yet, as she thought of Lila, of the will, of the future she was building, a quiet strength settled in her chest. She'd chosen hope over obligation, and that was enough. The next day, Eleanor and Lila went to the community center together. Lila had a new sketch, one she'd worked on after Michael's Visita drawing of two hands clasped, one old and wrinkled, one young and strong. It's us, Lila said, her voice shy but proud. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. It's perfect, she said. And in that moment, she knew she'd made the right choice, no matter what came next. The days after Michael's visit were a strange mix of calm and unease. Eleanor felt lighter, as if she'd shed a burden she'd carried too long. But the silence from her son was a wound that wouldn't close. She didn't regret her decision, but she mourned the boy he'd been, the one she'd lost somewhere along the way. Lila's presence helped, her quiet strength a balm to Eleanor's heart. They fell into a rhythm, cooking together, sharing stories, filling the apartment with life. At the community center, Eleanor noticed a change in Lila. She was more confident, her sketches bolder, as if Eleanor's belief in her had unlocked something. One day, Lila showed her a new drawing, a vibrant mural design, full of color and movement. I want to paint this somewhere, Lila said. Maybe on the center's wall, if they'll let me. Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling. They'd be fools not to. Lila's dream of an art studio began to take shape, fueled by their late-night talks. Eleanor encouraged her, sharing ideas, even suggesting they visit local galleries for inspiration. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt part of something bigger, a purpose beyond survival. She didn't tell Lila about the will. She wasn't ready yet, but the knowledge that she was giving Lila a future kept her going. But Michael wasn't done. A week after his visit, a letter arrived. Not from him, but from a lawyer. It was a formal demand, questioning Eleanor's mental capacity and threatening to contest any changes to her will. The words were cold, legal, but the intent was clear. Michael was fighting back. Eleanor read the letter, her hands steady but her heart racing. She called Mr. Hargrove immediately. They're bluffing, he said after reviewing the letter. You're as sharp as ever, Eleanor. They'd have no case. But this could get ugly. Are you prepared for that? Eleanor nodded, though her throat was tight. I've come this far, she said. I'm not turning back. That evening, she told Lila about the letter, leaving out the details of the will. Lila's face hardened. He's trying to scare you, she said. Don't let him. I won't, Eleanor promised. But the fear lingered. What if Michael dragged this out? What if he turned her grandchildren against her? The thought was unbearable, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the present and Lila, on the community center, on the life she was building. The center became their sanctuary. Eleanor started teaching a new knitting class, and Lila joined, her fingers clumsy but eager. They laughed together, their voices mingling with the chatter of others. One afternoon, a young man named Jamal, another regular at the center, approached them. Lila, that mural idea you mentioned. I talked to the director. They're in. They want you to paint it. Lila's eyes widened, her face breaking into a grin. Really? They said yes. Jamal nodded. They're giving you the whole west wall. No budget. Thuff, you'll have to figure that out. Eleanor saw the spark in Lila's eyes, the kind of hope she hadn't seen in years. We'll make it happen, she said, squeezing Lila's hand. Together. That night, they planned the mural, sketching ideas on scraps of paper. Lila wanted it to tell a story of struggle, of community, of second chances. Eleanor suggested including a figure inspired by the center's members, a symbol of resilience. As they worked, Eleanor felt a joy she hadn't known since Michael was young, a sense of creating something that mattered. But the threat of Michael's lawyer loomed. A few days later, he called again, his voice calmer but no less insistent. Mom, let's settle this, he said. I don't want to fight you. Just give me what I need, and we'll call it even. Eleanor's grip on the phone tightened. There's nothing to settle, she said. You made your choice when you put money over me. I've made mine. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice cold. You'll regret this. After he hung up, Eleanor sat in silence, her heart heavy but her resolve unbroken. She looked at Lila's sketches on the table, at the mural design taking shape, and felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for Lila, for the center, for the belief that kindness could outlast greed. As the days passed, Eleanor and Lila threw themselves into the mural project. They scrounged for supplies, rallied the center's members, and turned the west wall into a canvas of hope. Eleanor watched Lila paint, her strokes bold and sure, and knew she'd made the right choice. Whatever Michael did, whatever came next, she was ready. The mural took shape over weeks, transforming the community center's west wall into a vibrant tapestry of color and story. Lila painted with a passion Eleanor hadn't seen before, her brushstrokes weaving together images of broken homes, clasped hands, and rising suns. The center's members joined in, adding small to chase a child's handprint, a painted flower making it a collective dream. Eleanor watched, her heart full, knowing this was the legacy she wanted to leave. Michael's threats didn't stop. Another letter arrived, more aggressive, hinting at a lawsuit if Eleanor didn't reconsider. Mr. Hargrove assured her it was still a bluff, but the stress weighed on her. She tired more easily now, her body betraying her even as her spirit held firm. Lila noticed, her eyes sharp with concern. You're pushing yourself too hard, she said one evening, as they cleaned paintbrushes in Eleanor's kitchen. Let me handle more. You're already doing enough, Eleanor replied, smiling. This mural, it's your heart on that wall. I'm just proud to be part of it. Lila's face softened. You're more than part of it. You're why I'm doing it. The words stayed with Eleanor, warming her through the cold nights when doubt crept in. She still hadn't told Lila about the will, unsure how to broach it without overwhelming her. But as the mural neared completion, Eleanor knew the time was coming. She wanted Lila to understand the gift, not just the money, but the trust behind it. One morning, as they prepared for the mural's unveiling, Eleanor found a letter slipped under her door. It was from Michael, handwritten, not typed by a lawyer. Mom, it read, I'm sorry. I've been a terrible son. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it. Let's talk. No money, just us. Her hands shook as she read it, torn between hope and skepticism. Was this genuine, or another ploy? She showed the letter to Lila, who read it silently. What do you think? Eleanor asked. Lila set the letter down, her eyes thoughtful. People can change, she said, but only if they mean it. You'll know when you see him. Eleanor nodded, unsure but willing to try. She called Michael, arranging to meet at a cafe near the community center. When she arrived, he was already there, looking smaller than she remembered, his bravado gone. Mom, he said, standing. I meant what I wrote. I've been awful. I want to make this right. She sat, studying him. Why now? She asked. After everything. Michael looked down, his hands fidgeting. I hit rock bottom, he said. Claire left me. The business is gone. I looked at my kids and realized I'd failed them. Just like I failed you. I don't expect you to fix me. I just want you back in my life. Eleanor's heart ached, but she didn't soften. You hurt me, Michael. Deeply. Words like that, your funeral can wait, they don't just vanish. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I know. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you'll let me. They talked for hours, tentative at first, then more openly. Michael admitted his mistakes, his greed, his blindness. Eleanor listened, her heart torn between the mother who wanted to forgive and the woman who'd learned to protect herself. She didn't promise anything, but she agreed to keep talking, to try. The mural's unveiling came the next day, a celebration that drew the whole community. Lila stood before the crowd, nervous but radiant, and spoke about the wall, about second chances, about family found in unexpected places. She looked at Eleanor as she spoke, her eyes shining. This is for you, she said, for believing in me. The crowd applauded, and Eleanor felt tears stream down her face. After, she pulled Lila aside and told her about the will. I'm leaving everything to you, she said. Not because I have to, but because I want to. You're my family now. Lila sobbed, hugging her tightly. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You've given me more than money. You've given me hope. As the weeks passed, Eleanor and Michael took small steps toward reconciliation. It wasn't easy, trust was fragile, and wounds ran deep, but they tried. Eleanor introduced him to Lila, and though it was awkward, she saw a flicker of the son she'd loved. She didn't change her will, and Michael didn't ask her to. For the first time, he seemed to understand her worth beyond dollars. Eleanor's days grew shorter, her body weaker, but her heart was full. She'd chosen to give her legacy to a stranger who'd become family. And in doing so, she'd found peace. As she watched Lila paint, laughed with her grandchildren, and shared quiet moments with Michael, she knew she'd written the ending she wanted, a story of love, redemption, and the courage to choose hope over hurt.